Hello and welcome to this Blender tutorial. Today I'm just going to go over the light paths node and cycles and sort of show you what you can do with it, what all the little options mean. For this I'm just going to be using Blender 2.69 release candidate 1. So yes, I am going to have the new option ray depth. I'll be going over that. So let's get started. Okay, so as you can see, I've just brought in a pretty simple scene right now. It just consists of a plane that's got a checker texture, an icosphere that's glass, and an emitter, which is where I'm going to start, that's just got a standard emission for now. But something that I like to do in my art is I like to have invisible emitters, so that you can just have light showing up. You don't have to have this green blob on your screen. So to do that, you need to use the light path node, hook that up into a mix shader, and then plug the emission into the first input and a transparent into the second input. And then as soon as you hook that up for your surface, you'll end up with an invisible light showing up. So also in the scene, I have this glass icosphere, and as you can see, it's refracting the light from this emitter here. And while that is realistic, and if you were doing a lot of samples it would look really good, it sort of looks bad right now because I'm only taking 6 to 10 samples right now. So you end up with a lot of pixels that just look kind of out of place. Over here, this green is just showing up and it honestly looks bad. So if I were to take this, I can make it just show the glass as a material and not like have the light bending around it by using a light paths node. So I'm going to take and put in the second input, the glass, and I think I'm about to do this backwards, but I'll see. I think that, I don't know. But if you put a light path to it, I'll see pretty quickly. I'm going to take isCameraRay and use that as the factor value. And, oh, I've done it right, okay. You have transparent going into the first input for shaders, and then glass going in as the second input. And you end up with it just rendering the glass bending the light, but not having that light bent back into the scene. If that makes any sense. You can sort of tell what I mean. I don't really think it needs a lot of explaining, but yeah, that's what it does. So that's pretty useful. It makes the scene less noisy, which is a problem whenever you use a lot of glass. So if that's all you wanted to know, just how to do some basic things with light paths, then I guess you're set. But if you'd like to know a little bit more about it, I am going to go into depth on all these little options, so stick around. So as you can see, I've changed the scene to just have a sphere right now. I'm going to bring in more objects later, but for the first option I just need this. isCameraRay is just going to ask the scene basically, is the light going straight to the camera or is it hitting something else and then going to the camera? And if it's just going straight to the camera, then it gets a value of 1, which gives it the second shader. But if it is hitting something else, it gets a value of 0 and goes to the first shader. It's basically just a true-false tester, whether or not the light is going straight to the camera. And I don't think it really takes a lot of explaining because it's so simple. The second option is Shadow Ray. I'm going to move to a different scene for a second. I'm going back to the sphere for the rest of these things, but just for a moment I'm going to switch to this. isShadow Ray is just, once you plug that into the mix shader, going to render the object as a regular material, and then the shader in the bottom is going to choose the color of the shadow. It has to be a transparent shader. If you use something else, then it's going to render a black shadow regardless of what color you set it to. Basically, the light's just going to pass through the transparent shader and then that makes it blue. If it were anything else, then the light couldn't pass through it and it would just be black. To show you the third option, I'm going to bring in a cube that just has a normal glossy shader attached to it. And I actually did take this and add a light path to it just to get rid of a little bit of the noise that was going on over here. Sort of the same deal as the glass a moment ago. It was sending some green over here and I didn't like that, so I just got rid of that by adding a diffuse shader to it, but that's not important right now. If I take this sphere, I'm going to hook it up with isDiffuseRay. And basically what this is asking is the light hitting a diffuse shader first? And if it is, then it takes the 1 material. If it's not, then it takes the 0 material. Be aware that if it bounces off something, like this, it's reflected, then it's going to stay green even after it's reflected. So it'll come from this sphere, bounce off of this mirror, and then it can hit the ground. Like right here, you sort of see a little bit of green there, just because it's being reflected, I think reflected off of this, and then back down here. But if it hits the diffuse material first, then it'll bounce off this purple regardless. As I switch to isGlossyRay, it seems pretty much common sense. It's just going to flip that around, and if it bounces off of a mirror first, then it's going to take the 1 material. If it's not bouncing off that first, then it's going to take the 0 material, even if it's reflected later. And just for the record, glass materials are considered glossy. So be aware that if you have glass, it is going to be rendered with the 1 material through it. And if you have glass that's going to bend the light, it's going to end up sort of emitting the lights. Right here you can see it's rendering purple. It's refracting over here. So just keep that in mind. The 5th option is singular ray. Is pretty much, as far as I can tell, exactly the same as is camera ray, because they're asking such similar questions. And I think it's actually the same question, as far as I can tell. Is singular ray is just saying, is it just 1 ray? Is it changing at all before it gets to the camera? And if yes, then it gets the 0 material. If it's not, and it is a singular ray, then it gets the 1 material. And really, is camera ray was asking the same thing, so personally I can't tell a difference, but I'm sure there's probably something. The 6th option is reflection ray. It's going to ask, is this light being reflected before anything else happens to it? So it's similar to isDiffuse and isGlossyRay, because it's just asking before anything else. So if you have it like this lens right here, it's going to take this light and transmit it, and then emit it right here, and it can stay green even though it's being reflected here, because it was transmitted first. If it's reflected and then transmitted, like right here, it'll take the 1 material because it's being reflected first. When I switch to isTransmissionRay, once again, it's pretty much common sense. If the light's going to get transmitted first by glass, then it's going to take the 1 material, even if it's reflected later, like right here. And also, if it's reflected first and then goes through the transmitter, then it's going to keep 0 material just because it was reflected first. To show off ray depth, I'm going to bring in another UV sphere. Basically, it's set up just like this one, but put right beside this cube, because the light that's being reflected is going to take color based on how far it is away. If it's less than a blender unit away, it's going to take something closer to green, but if it's more than 1, it's going to take the 1 material. These 2 bottom options are the only ones that will give you a value between 0 and 1. The other 2 are just going to pick 0 or 1. You can take this ray length option and use a math node on it. As soon as you do that, I'm going to multiply it by 0.5. It'll take that one Blender unit, and it'll basically, right now it's multiplying that, well, dividing it by 2, and so you have 2 Blender units is what it's testing for now. It'll take the second material once the object that's reflecting it is 2 Blender units away, so you get more green because this is really close to the cube. But you can use this to make lights that are going to sort of fade from one color to the other. At least that's the most useful thing I've noticed with it. Right here I just took a sphere and I made it invisible while it's still emitting light. And then I also have this emission set up right here. Just going to multiply it by 0.5 and then subtract 0.1 from it just to get the start to be the color that I had wanted. And you can have it fade from yellow to red as you go away, giving you a nice warm look to a light. The last option is ray depth, and this one's pretty simple. It's just going to be asking, alright, how many things is this passing through before it hits the camera? So to show it, I'm going to have to divide by 2 again, because it's counting. It's not just giving you 0 or 1, it's going to be counting out how many passes the light has before it gets to the camera. So you can see that it doesn't go through anything on this sphere, it just goes straight to the camera, so you get a value of 0, and then that gives you the 0 shader. And since I'm dividing by 2, whenever you have a light pass through only one thing before it gets to the camera, it would get a value of 1 and then divide by 2 and end up being 0.5 and get an exact mix between these two, which is a whitish, yellowish color. And then if it passes through 2 things, like right here where it's being refracted and then reflected, or right here where it's being reflected off the diffuse shader and then refracted back through this glass pane, it's going to get a value of 2, and then I'm going to divide by 2 and get 1 and just assign it pink. So really that's everything on the light paths node right now. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, I'm going to be making more of these probably. So if you want to, go ahead and subscribe if you want. I'd appreciate that. If not, you know, that's cool too. Go ahead, see if I care. But thank you for watching, sticking around, and I'll see you guys next time.